This is one of the most extraordinary plants in the world and is one of 15 that I'll blow your mind with in this video. And this video is sponsored by Squarespace, but more on them in a jiffy. This is Titan arum, or Amphoralis titanium, if you want to go fancy, is one of the rarest plants in the world. In fact, it's endangered in its natural habitat in Sumatra, Indonesia, but luckily for us, you will be able to find it being lovingly cared for in a few botanical gardens in the world, like at Kew Gardens here in the UK. So what's all the fuss about then? Well, this plant is dubbed the corpse flower because it stinks of rotting flesh when in bloom. Apparently, it's so stinky that most folks can't bear to be near the thing for more than a few minutes. And it's not trolling us either. There's actually a very good reason why it does this. To attract flesh and dung-loving pollinators far and wide so that the circle of life can continue. But the smell isn't the only fascinating part, because this guy only sends out his flower once every 5 or so years, and when it does, it's 3 meters tall. Yes, 3 meters, taller than even the giants of the NBA. So the sight of this smelly flower is so rare that it normally draws a massive crowd. In fact, when this flowered for only the second time at Kew Gardens in 1926, the first time was nearly 30 years prior to that, it grew such a massive crowd that police were called to control them. The Beatles of the plant world, you might say then. Now, I say flower, but that isn't actually correct. It's actually an inflorescence that consists of a cluster of smaller individual flowers, a bit like your good old peace lily at home, but this fella has the largest inflorescence in the world. We now go from the peculiarly putrid to the downright weird with this rather odd looking plant called Dracula simia. It doesn't need much explaining from me to tell you why this plant is so extraordinary. I mean, look at it. Dracula simia translates to little dragon monkey and is actually an orchid native to the tropical forests of Ecuador. To see this guy in his natural habitat would require a pretty epic trek because they thrive in altitudes of 2,000 meters, but they can also be grown at home. Yes, you can get these online and use them to scare your kids at home. Perfect entertainment. It can bloom any time of year with multiple flowers that open one after the other. Imagine having one of these with 10 or so monkey-faced blooms staring at you from a dark corner of the room. Scaring your kids isn't the only reason you'd want to get these for your home. The flowers apparently smell like ripe oranges. How charming. Later in this video, I'll show you the world's ugliest plant, the world's most painful plant, the world's deadliest tree, as well as the world's only unkillable plant. But first, let me introduce you to the world's shyest plant. Yes, this is Mimosa pudika, which is more commonly known as the sensitive plant, and this guy has developed a wonderfully cunning way to avoid getting eaten by animals. Touch the leaves of this cheeky chappy and they disappear in a puff of smoke as if they were never there. Bambi will have no clue what just happened, and the mimosa gets to live and fight for another day. When the plant is touched, the feathery leaves fold up and the stems droop. The effect is due to the quick release of water from the special cells at the bases of the individual leaflets and leaf stalks. The plant then takes several minutes to unfurl afterwards. Now, this guy is readily available to buy for your garden or even as a houseplant, and are normally grown from seed every year. Once you've got it to germinate and develop into a full plant, I wouldn't sit there playing with it all day though. Similar to a Venus flytrap, it takes significant resources for the plant to close its leaves, and the little fella will eventually get tired and stop doing it. In this case, you need to leave it to recuperate for a few weeks. Keep touching it and it will shorten its life, the poor fella. We've all probably got memories of running joyously through a field as kids during the summer holidays wearing nothing but shorts and sandals, only for that joy to turn into a nightmare when we realise we've just run through a field of stinging nettles and our legs have been stung to death. Let me know if this has happened to you. Now imagine that pain and times it by 500 and you might get close to the potent sting that comes off of the world's most painful plant, Gimpy. The sting of this plant is said to be so terrible that it's like being burnt with hot acid and electrocuted at the same time. Wowzers! The Gimpy tree is an innocuous looking plant with large heart-shaped leaves that grow in the rainforests of Australia and Malaysia. But looks can be deceiving. Are you ready for this? Folklore says that one early settler who mistakenly used the leaves for toilet purposes shot himself to end all the agony. This is probably why it's been dubbed the suicide plant. So not one to be messed around with, and certainly not one to wipe your bum with when you're caught short outside. You'll be forgiven for thinking that this is just another dead plant in the desert, but this is actually Witcheria mirabilis, a live and kicking plant that grows in barren deserts of Namibia and Angola and is described as the world's ugliest plant. Not only is the plant ugly, it's also weird, very old and extremely resilient. In fact, some individual plants are believed to have lived for over 1,000 years in conditions of extreme drought. But not quite the oldest plant though, there's an even older one coming up. The weirdest feature of the Witcheria is that it produces just 2 true leaves. They are the original leaves from when the plant was a seedling, which continue to grow and are never shed. They grow throughout the 1,000-year long life of the plant to the length of 2 to 4 meters before splitting and fraying over time to form many strap-like segments. A true specimen of ugliness, I'm sure you'll agree, but also one that probably has a story or two to tell, if it could talk. You might think that these are stones, but they are actually succulent plants. These are called lithops and have grown massively in popularity in recent years because of how funky they are to look at and also how easy they are to care for, provided you hardly water them. Lithops are stemless succulents that resemble stones to avoid being eaten by animals in their natural habitat. They're from some of the driest regions in South Africa and require very little water. In fact, some of them rely only on mist and fog for moisture. Each lithop plant comprises just 2 thick fleshy fused leaves designed to hold the water the plant needs to survive. The leaves have a slit at the top from where new leaves and flowers develop. These guys are one of the rare types of plants that are not considered poisonous, instead relying on their camouflage to avoid being eaten. Very nifty. If you didn't know, Sheffield Made Plants has its very own website, and using today's video sponsor Squarespace to set it all up was a breeze. Now, I had no idea where to even begin with all this website malarkey, but Squarespace made it all so easy with easy to use templates and tools to make it all look pretty and actually function like a website. We've all got things we'd love to share with the world, of course, so why not head over to squarespace.com for a free trial to check it all out for yourself and leave your mark on the world. When you're ready to launch your very own little empire, follow my link in the description to bag yourself a 10% discount off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Happy creating, my plant friend. Right, this next specimen looks like something that wouldn't be out of place in Hogwarts' Forbidden Forest and has a deadly name to boot: Strangler Fig. This guy is something else, let me tell you. Strangler figs begin life as just a harmless little seed sat on a tree branch high up on the canopy of the jungle and are usually left there by an animal after it's done its business. As the young strangler fig grows, long roots grow down menacingly along the trunk of the host tree, eventually completely engulfing the trunk. Once these roots reach the ground, they enter the soil and the strangler fig starts to grow leaves. The growth process of strangler figs can be murderous, even leading to the death of its host. The roots constrict the trunk of the host tree and surround the roots, cutting off the nutrient and water supply. And if that wasn't enough, its thick foliage high up in the canopy can also steal precious sunlight, killing the host from all angles. Not an altogether pleasant beast then. Coming up, I've got the world's oldest tree, a flower that looks like Darth Vader, and a plant that is impossible to kill. But first, I think it's time for something a little more light-hearted. This is Wolfia aritza, which to the untrained eye simply looks like pond scum or algae, but is in fact the world's smallest flowering plant. Otherwise known as watermill, each plant is only the size of a pinhead and weighs about the same as 2 grains of table salt, barely enough to notice them individually. It produces a minute flower fully equipped with 1 stamen and 1 pistil. It's an aquatic plant that is often found covering large bodies of still water such as ponds. So imagine jumping into a lake and getting these in all your crevices and whatnot. Not pleasant. This is one that I show to the chefies over on Patreon, which is linked in the description to this video, by the way. This is called the Rosa Jericho, or resurrection plant. So cool because it's virtually impossible to kill the thing. It lives in this dried state for years until someone comes along and wakes it up with some water, love and care. And that's just what I did in a bonus video for the chefies. Before our very eyes, it went from a dead looking creature to this rather odd looking rosette. This curling up into a crispy ball is a survival mechanism that the plant developed in the harsh conditions of its native habitat in the Chichuan Desert, where the dormant plants travel the desert as tumbleweeds until they find water. So you can leave it to dry up again, forget about it for years, and it won't die. Amazing. Now, the first plant in this video was the putrid smelling corpse flower, and we're back at it again with another delightful delicacy, the Rafflesia arnoldii, or the stinking corpse flower. As the name suggests, this guy is an absolute stinker, but what marks this apart from the corpse lily is that it blooms into the single largest individual flower in the whole world. Once it does, it emits a right pong, similar to rotting meat, attracting insects such as flies and beetles that normally feed on dead flesh. These flesh-loving creatures pollinate the flower, allowing it to spread through the rainforests of Borneo. And to assist with pollination, Rafflesia flowers also produce heat, which helps to spread the foul aroma. Due to the incredibly specific requirements of the plant, almost no botanical gardens have a stinking corpse flower in cultivation, so you'd have to follow your nose in the jungle to find one. Who's joining me? As old timers go, the Methuselah tree in California's White Mountains takes some beating. This ancient bristlecone pine is 4,854 years old. Not a bad performance when it comes to avoiding the Grim Reaper, eh? This tree is so old it was alive and kicking by the time ancient Egyptians built the pyramids at Giza. Imagine the tales it could tell. If only it had a mouth and a brain. What would you ask it? I mentioned the Dracula simia earlier, you know, the orchid with those weird but funny monkey face flowers. Well, how about an alternative that is much more menacing? This is Aristolochia salvadorensis, otherwise known as the Darth Vader plant, and I think you can see where it gets its name from. This is another orchid, but this time the flower shares a striking resemblance to the Sith Lord himself, Darth Vader. So if you're a Star Wars fan, then you'll definitely want to have this gem in your home. This is a climbing plant from Brazil that grows in wet meadows and floodplains. The strange and creepy appearance of its flowers is because it's adapted to survive in tough conditions. The helmet-like shape and purple colour, along with a smell like rotting flesh, attracts insects that help with pollination. When insects go inside the flower through the luminous eyes, they get trapped briefly by sticky hairs getting covered in pollen. After a while, they are released to go and pollinate other flowers. So another crafty plant using insects to do their dirty work. This weird looking thing is the flower of the Hydnora africana, which is found in the deserts of southern Africa. The weird thing about this guy is that apart from its flower, it lives entirely underground without any roots, leaves or anything. It acts like a mysterious underground vampire, using suckers on its stem to extract juices from the roots of another plant, the Euphorbia maritinacea. You can't see this plant above ground, except when its flower bursts out, expands, and reveals a striking pink bloom with a rather disturbing appearance if you catch my drift. It takes about a year for the bloom to grow from a bud to a fully fledged flower under decent conditions. When it's ready, the flower releases a strong scent of rotting meat to attract flies and dung beetles, tricking them into thinking that it's a dead animal. As these insects enter the flower, the hairs around the entrance bend inwards to keep them from escaping. Inside, the flower is smooth and slippery, causing insects to slip and slide, trapping them, and only after these insects have helped in pollination does the flower's entrance open, allowing them to finally escape. What do you think? A good addition to your back garden? Ever fancy giving one of your green buddies a kiss? Yeah, me neither. Well, try telling that to a Palicalea elata, known as hot lips. Funny looking things, aren't they? This tropical tree hangs out in the rainforests of Central and South America, showing off its eye-catching feature, bright red lips. Well, actually, they're bright red bracts. These red bracts are all about catching the attention of pollinators such as hummingbirds and butterflies. As these bracts unfold, they show off the plant's flower, but because they aren't actually flowers, they don't have a fragrance. Instead, it relies on visual cues to attract its pollinator pals. So those stunning red lips are like a colourful invitation for hummingbirds and butterflies to join the party and help with pollination. Very nifty. Now, this plant is perhaps the creepiest plant of the entire video because of what it can do to little animals minding their own business. This is a Nepenthes or pitcher plant, and those pitchers that hang down are not just for show. No, they have a much more sinister function, a murderous function that will give you nightmares for weeks. Click on this video to find out what they do and how they do it. It's fascinating. And make sure you subscribe for more fun. See you next time.